What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome to the Muscle Intelligence Q&A version. I've got my wonderful, amazing, and beautiful co-host, Ashleigh, here with me.
That's lovely. Thanks, Ben. I'm glad you're back in the cold with the rest of us.
No, only for a couple days.
Yeah, but you survived 30 hours of travel, so that's pretty impressive.
You know, it was way less traumatic than I expected. When I saw 30 hours on the, that I was booking my flight, I was like, there's got to be a better way. But it wasn't so bad. So I flew from Bali 8 hours to Korea and then had a 9.5-hour layover and then did, I think, 13 or 14 hours from Korea. So it worked out really, really well, my flight from Bali to Korea, that it was a 1 a.m. flight. And I'm never up to 1 a.m. So I kept myself awake. And I literally slept from before we took off till the time that the wheels hit down. And I almost never do that. But my sleep had been so scheduled in Bali. Like, I've been getting really good sleeps. My body was just like, hey, I'm ready to go. And I didn't move for 8 hours, which was awesome.
That's impressive. Okay, next question. What is the airport like in, I'm assuming, South Korea?
Well, it was interesting. So I had 9.5 hours. I'm like, all right, I got to go outside. I got to go and see the city or something. Except that, I don't know if you noticed, but the second biggest breakout of coronavirus in the entire world was in South Korea.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone's like, they might not let you in the country. And I was like, back into Canada when I come back. And I was like, snap. So I went out and I was talking to all the tour guides and all the information ladies. And to go into downtown Seoul from the airport, I was in Incheon airport. I guess it's anywhere from an hour 15 to an hour and a half just to get into the city. And I was like, oh man, that's a long way. So I ended up going for an hour long walk around the airport and went back in the airport. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lock down in one of the executive rooms and just do some work.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing some reading and some writing and some planning. And I mean, I had a really good, necessary week in Bali. I think my life, I'm very guilty of getting caught up sometimes in the whirlwind, and there's so much going on. It's hard to really be productive. It's hard to get things done. And this is just this idea of living this subjective life. And this is kind of an awareness I had this morning that I like to talk about, is subjective versus objective living. I mean, this is a really good way for my brain to understand it. It may not work for anybody else's brain. But so subjective living is responsive living, right? It's a reactive living, I guess I should say. So when I wake up in the morning, subjective life is subject to everything else around you. Something happens, I respond. Something happens, I respond. And that's effectively what's been happening in my life. Is I've been so busy with stuff that of living this really, really subjective life, rather than an objective life is I'm working toward an outcome. I'm working toward this very objective end result, and everything is very objective. My nutrition is objective. My days are objective. My planning is objective. And nothing that happens in my life creates subjectivity because I'm so objective with everything I do. And that's really been this awareness, is I've been living way too much of a subjective life, just allowing everything else, kind of the wind, to take me in places I just don't want to go. And that's both personally and professionally. And it was very, very useful for me to spend a week literally by myself in Bali without Milos there. Was, certainly it was awesome to have him there when he was in Australia, and certainly awesome to not as well, because it allowed me just some time to reflect and journal and meditate and be the hippie, granola crunching, barefoot walking guy that I really am.
Except without the granola, because we all know you're not eating sugar. Come on.
Yeah. But I mean, it was great because, I'm very easily pulled back into the world of bodybuilding, and not that I dislike it. I love muscle building, but to pull back into that, typical routine of training twice a day and eating too much protein and, just kind of overeating, I guess, getting back into that routine, it just feels like it pulls me back into the whole lifestyle, and not in a bad way at all. I think it's an important grounding lifestyle, but I like to have a nice balance of, this really goal-directed muscle building behavior, and then goal-directed professional development as well, which tends to take away from it.
Tell me a little bit more about this subjective versus objective approach to business, to life, but to really sort of making your own way and building the life that you want. Because one of the questions that I have witnessing the work that you do and a lot of other successful people I know, and myself to a lesser extent, is the difficulty sometimes in saying no to things, or knowing when to say yes to things, or knowing when to focus on one thing over another. And it's difficult when you have all of these opportunities and you're an ambitious person and you want to work hard and you want to grow the things that you're doing, and knowing that sometimes saying no is going to help you on your path rather than the opposite. So like, how did you kind of work through this a little bit when you had some sort of time to yourself?
I honestly went to bed last night setting the intention of getting clarity on exactly what you just asked, Ash. Is like, I want to get clarity on how do I get this, goal achievers mindset. And, example for you, when I set the objective to compete in the Mr. Olympia contest, there was nothing along the way that could have pulled me away. I was so goal directed. It was an objective that I had. And then everything I did along this path contributed to that objective. So it's an objective outcome. I'm working toward this. So no matter what occurred along the way, nothing was going to pull me away from that objective. And this is the goal-directed behavior. Whereas, if you wake up in the morning and you don't have a very particular objective outcome or objective goal, it's very easy to go, oh, well, this way over here is going to be a little bit easier for me today. It's easier to take the easy path rather than the objective path, right? So the best example is this morning I was meditating and I decided I was going to do exactly a 20-minute meditation. And at 18 minutes, my brain just stopped and I was like, oh, I'm done. My meditation's over. And I was like, no, like I set the objective of 20 minutes and there's nothing that's going to pull me away from this. So I literally put my focus back on and went back to that last 90 seconds or 2 minutes of meditation because I set the objective. So rather than allowing things like the wind to pull me in different directions and it creates a subjective living, I have a very goal-directed lifestyle. So I think that's maybe my newest awareness in life is always making things objective, including, hey, I eat within 30 minutes of waking up. Hey, I eat at noon every day. Hey, I eat at 4 p.m. every day. And I don't eat after 6 p.m. Like, stuff like that is like creating these very particular objective outcomes that just becomes who you are rather than, floating around with the wind. And I guess the issue is it becomes too easy to take the easy path, right? To take the path of least resistance. And if you're subjective about things, your unconscious will always go, hey, Ash, that way over there is much easier than that way. Go that way. Even though the other way could be the better path for you working toward the objective, if you're not conscious of it, your brain will just pull you toward the easy path. So I'm really going to go deep on understanding my life and what I need to do objectively. So creating, even if it's daily objectives and weekly objectives and 10-year objectives, like, is everything working toward this long-term objective outcome that I have? And if it's not, what the hell am I doing? Like, it allows it to be so much more objective, I guess, being the word, right? It allows it to be so much more clear when to choose this path versus that one.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That resonates a lot with me too, because I think people, like what you said, when you create an environment where there's, not to say that there's no flexibility, because there always is, but where there's less choice because you've just built a structure that enables you to be successful every day instead of having to make the choice. Do I go to the gym? Do I eat now? What do I eat? What do I have? What's in front of me? What do I do next? That sets up the opportunity for you to, as you said, choose the path of least resistance and make the easy choices instead of the right ones. And I think one of the things that I've learned from watching you and having these conversations is that doing the work to create this sort of vision of what you want for yourself or your business and coming back to it over and over again. It doesn't have to stay static. It doesn't have to, your goal doesn't have to stay the same forever, or what you envision your own success to be doesn't have to stay the same, but to constantly be putting work into that and coming back to it and having that sort of precedent and that baseline helps kind of enable all the other choices you make during a day. So that's one of the things that I've had to really to work on and struggle with a little bit because, and I'm sure there's people listening who feel similarly to this, where they're in a place in their career, their life, where they feel ready to go. They feel ready to level it up and take it to the next step. And they know they have all of these skills and ability and passion, but they don't know what's kind of stopping them. And I would say that in a lot of cases, it's certainly been the case for me in the past, that it's just that you don't have a clear enough vision, like you're saying, about what it is that you actually want to do. You're good at things, you're excited about things, you want to be somewhere, but if you aren't putting that effort into writing it down, to reflecting, to meditating on it, to thinking about, okay, what exactly does it look like? And then you can kind of figure out the steps to get there. And that's harder than people think, obviously, because, we've just got these sort of intangible thoughts flowing around in our head and we're not putting the work in to solidifying that for ourselves?
I don't know if it's hard. I just don't think it's common, right? I think the objective is to have this massively transformative purpose, which is your life purpose that, if you die in 100 years, that if you've accomplished that, you've lived a fulfilled life. And I think we're not taught that from a young age, to have something that's pulling you. So most people have a 1-year goal or a 10-year goal, but they don't have that like 25-year vista, that 25-year goal. And I think that idea of the massively transformative purpose in life, which is like, if I can solve this one issue in humanity at some point in my life, it's the moonshot, right? And I guess the best example of it is, again, I don't know if most people are aware of this, but super interesting to acknowledge that the country of China has a 10,000 year plan. And that's baffling to think about, right? So most countries are worrying about 1 year or even 4 years of office, or maybe they're on a 10-year plan, but China has a 10,000 year plan that, regardless of who's in office, who's leading the country at that time, they must adhere to this 10,000 year plan. And that's really interesting to conceptualize, and why chances are they're going to end up exactly where they want to be, because they may get a little bit off track, but never massively, right? So super interesting to think about, where are you with respect to your massively transformative purpose? And are you ultimately staying on track for that vista, or are you being blown with every little wind that comes along?
Mm-hmm. What's your 10,000 year plan?
No idea.
Still working on it.
So that's a culture, right? Like with us, it's like, yeah. So with us, it's more like, hey, how am I going to change the planet? For me, man, I think about it all the time. Like, I had an interesting childhood, and I don't ever want to say it was bad, because, that was the story I told myself at the time. But looking back on it, it could have been so much worse. And I spend time every single day being grateful in my mind for everything that happened to me as a child, including all the things that could be perceived as not awesome or not great. I think it's important to know that maybe my mission and my vision is to just let people know that regardless what story they tell themselves, they can thrive. They can be happy. They can be joyful. They should be. And our whole culture will shift when we start teaching our children a different way of looking at the world. We talk about, I actually just finished writing, I'm writing up my personal trainer certification. I think I told you about that, Ash. Is in April, the first version of my certifications going out throughout Canada. So we're doing Canada throughout the spring and summer, and then it looks like we're going back to Australia and the UK in the fall. But I'm writing out just this concept of how everything in our society is externally driven, and how people are sold on this reality that if you're sick, you need a pill. If you're anxious, you need an antidepressant. Or if you're feeling a little down, maybe you need some ice cream. Or if you're feeling lonely, you need to watch TV. And like all these things outside of yourself, and go. Those are just generic examples that pop into my mind, but really, we're told that all of these feelings that we have inside of our body are bad and need to be cured with something outside of ourselves, obviously to drive consumerism. And I think one of my massively transformative purposes in life is to empower people with the knowledge and skill set to, one, build their body, but two, to know they can, right? Give hope to let people realize the reason you're not doing the things that you want to in your life is because of the bullshit story you have as to what you can't. And you can change it if we give you the skill set and we let you understand it. And I think you're aware that the entire certification is built around the 6 pillars. And it's this idea that as a human being, there's only really 6 things that we can control, right? It's how we move, how we think, how we eat, how we sleep, and how we breathe. That's 5. And the 6th one being our environment, the environment in which we do all of those. And that's really all we can impact. And if we learn as a human being, like, hey, we've got this framework of 6 things that I can change, which one is it that I'm not paying attention to? All of a sudden, it's a little bit more within our realm of possibilities to start shifting our internal state, right? And our internal state is this combination of, hormones and inflammation and mindset and all these things that ultimately manifest to become the person we are. And that's really what this course is about. So I'm going to teach you how to build your body, great, but I'm also going to teach you how to understand all of the environmental inputs, all of the things that are creating this internal environment that expresses as an external body. And I think that's hopefully something that shifts into my massively transformative purpose of empowering people to just realize you can. Because as soon as you realize you can, you're absolutely capable. I think the world starts to shift. I believe the world starts to shift. Empowering people to be confident is so, so powerful, because if I'm confident, I may not be so mean to people anymore. I may not treat people this bad. I may not treat myself bad anymore because now I actually believe I can change, right? Rather than being this fixed mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you're saying, I think to some people maybe sounds a little esoteric, and not to say that that's denigrating it at all, but it's one of those things, like you're saying, we externalize everything so much. Everything is about what can comfort us, what can change our life, what's somebody else's fault, whatever. But it's really the exact opposite, because 99 or maybe 100% of our reality is actually taking place in our brains, whether we think about it that way or not. So what you're saying, the idea that the stories you tell are self-fulfilling, right? Whether they're positive or negative, you tell yourself you can or you can't. I mean, all of that, it literally changes your entire life overnight, how you perceive what's happening.
I love why you say it's esoteric, because I need to understand that. So when I say it in my own brain, I'm like, nothing about this sounds esoteric, meaning, yes, obviously we know that our environment, our history, I guess, creates our mind. But with respect to what I'm saying, it's really this objective thing of, hey, all of these inputs that you have going into your body, from the way you move, you think, you breathe, you eat, all these things, etc. Those are the things that are creating your body, right? And that seems pretty scientific or objective to me. There's nothing subjective about that. It's like the way that I breathe creates my internal environment.
Yeah.
The way that I move. Yeah.
No, I think what I'm saying is the idea, this is something we've been talking about and you've talked about for a long time, and we always come back to it because of how important it is what you were just saying about the stories that you tell yourself and how that manifests in the success or lack of in your life, right? And I think that a lot of people, and the reason why so many people still struggle with everything from fitness to health to happiness to achieving their goals, is because, as you said, people are still so externally focused. They're thinking, I'll achieve my goals once I look good. I'll achieve my goals once I have a bit more money, or once this person starts being nice to me, or once this happens, or whatever, And I think that people, and I struggle with this sometimes too, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that people often underestimate the importance and the power of knowing that they can change their internal state at any point, regardless of what's going on around them. You can be going, in a ball of flames, and still how you perceive the situation at hand is going to affect the outcome, and it completely changes your perspective. And I think that is very cut and dry, honestly, but it can sound a little esoteric to people who are still like, I just need to know the answer. I just need to know what to eat. I just need to know how to work out. I just need you to give me a little bit of money for my business. You know what I mean? Like, there are still people, of course, that still kind of tend to think that way. And until we can make that switch and start really internalizing our thought processes and how that relates to success, that's really the turning point. And that's why, it's not easy, or everybody would do it.
And the foundation of it all is questioning what you think you know, right? And I credit Tom Purvis for giving me this questioning attitude. I mean, I think I've always had it, but he's someone who really made me start to question everything I think I know. And, the first example, I actually had an hour-long conversation with my sister about this last night. We all have stories about, and when I say we all, maybe she and I, let's stick within that context, about what happened to us when we're children. But rather than focusing on those things that we determine to be negative, what if we instead chose to focus on the positive, right? So what if the only thing your parents gave you that was actually objective was this body that you have and this mind that you have and an opportunity to live? Like, what if they gave you that? What if you focused on just that, and everything else that happened after that was completely subjective to your perception of it? Mm-hmm. So the only objective thing they've ever actually given you is life. Maybe we could be positive for that, right? And everything after that, and anyone who's a parent will get this, anyone who's ever been in any relationship will get this. It's not about what you say, it's about what people interpret. So the child, maybe the events that happened to me were subject to my interpretation of them. So they were never really objective. So all these things, these stories that I tell myself as to why I had a troubling childhood, or why my parents were not always there for me, or why they were, whatever, difficult or mean, or whatever the story is I say, maybe it's just not true. And the only objective thing that I have is this amazing life with great healthy genetics and an amazing body and an amazing mind and a heart that beats in my chest. And man, maybe I could focus on that and go, wow, like I have this really short time. Or I could focus on all the shitty things in my life and go, I'm going to, spend the next 5 years wasting my life thinking about this other BS. Or I can realize that I've only got one shot at this human body. Let's go for it, right? Let's give it all I've got. And, shifting that perspective, I think is powerful, man. Like at the end of the day, it seems pretty realistic to think the only objective thing they ever really, really gave you was life. And everything else after that is subjective. So
I love that.
Yeah, thinking about it, I certainly got to see my dad last night. And the first thing I did was I was super grateful, super, super grateful. And I mean it from my heart, like I don't think sometimes people say they're grateful for things and don't actually embody it. But you got to embody it. And hopefully I actually do feel it at a conscious and unconscious level. And hopefully he feels it coming from me. And maybe that can forever bury all the stress that existed in our past. I don't think there's any stress that exists currently or in our future, hopefully, but that unconscious program that he's got guilt around and I've got stress around, like hopefully, but the fact that I've released it will allow him to also and live his life out for however long he's got left and be happy.
Mm-hmm. How does when you have this conversation or conversations like this with your sister, does she see it the same way you do? I mean, I think it's interesting. I have a number of siblings, and it's always been fascinating to me. I have a big family, how we could grow up in kind of relatively similar environments and still kind of turn out completely differently, have very different opinions about what our upbringing was actually like. So do you find that you and your sister kind of on the same page with your approach to this, or?
Now, not always. Yeah, she's coming along. So I think my sister's we have a tremendous amount of mutual respect. And the fact that when I speak about the stuff, she really listens and really tries to understand. I don't know that she agrees with it yet. I don't know that she fully understands it yet. But, I think I've given her some examples over the years where it makes it very, very clear and apparent why it's so important that we challenge our beliefs and ultimately try to let go of those programmings, those unconscious programmings that we carry with us. So yeah, I'd say in general, we're doing much better now, or at least we've got a great relationship now. And I think she does much better in starting to conceptualize and understand ultimately how this in no way serves her to be pissed off at anybody. And if anything, just hold her back from thriving. Right.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I love that. If that's like the biggest takeaway from today, that being grateful that you have life and your parents were the ones who gave that to you, because what else is there? Like we've talked about this before. You just said anger doesn't serve you in any way. And like you said, also your perception of your childhood and how that went is subjective. It's your perception and it could be different from time to time or wherever you are in your life or how other people see it. So what does it serve you to be angry or upset or to dwell on things that you think were less than optimal? Instead, just be grateful for what you have and what you can do with it moving forward. I mean, what else is there? That's it.
Yeah, especially if you're someone who's so blessed to come into this world with your health and with a fully functioning body and fully functioning mind. Like if you have nothing else in life to be grateful for toward your parents, that's the greatest gift that any human being could ever offer, right? If you think about it, if you conceptualize that, like you have everything and you're here and you're given equal opportunity, whether or not you believe in equal opportunity, right? If you have an enabled body, you have more or less every opportunity. After spending days in a third world country in Bali, you realize equal opportunity is not real, because these people are certainly not born into a place where they are allowed to thrive, especially for the listeners in first world countries. Man, we're so blessed. We're so lucky. Yeah. I have one question for you, Ash.
Yeah.
It's a little bit esoteric, but have you ever experienced somebody who doesn't feel guilt, even for things that are very obviously guilt worthy?
Can we talk about sociopaths here, Ben? Because I've definitely met a couple of them.
Is that what that is? I'm very curious. So I had an experience recently where if I had done something like this, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I can't conceive. I don't know if the person's feeling guilt. I just can't conceive is there such a thing as not feeling guilt for things that you know are very morally wrong? And have you ever experienced someone like that? Is that what it's called, a sociopath? I'm very
Yeah.
curious.
Well, I mean,
I'm me being honest.
yeah, I mean this could go down so many different rabbit holes. This could be a real nice long podcast, but I mean, again, I grew up with two like social behavioral psychologist parents, so I kind of like nerd out on this stuff a little bit. So I'm actually quite interested in how people's brains work and how they interact with each other. And I'm not any expert, but I'm fascinated with this kind of stuff too. But I mean, there's a couple things going into this, right? Without knowing what the actual circumstance was that the person should or should not have felt guilty about, there's a couple things. There's one, certainly that is describing on some level a sociopath when someone knowingly can do something that they know is either hurting or bad for someone else and not feel the requisite human guilt for doing something like that to somebody. There's certainly potentially a chemical thing going on there, but there's also in a lot of cases cultural and also just human nature that enables us to tell ourselves a story so that we don't have to feel guilty about the things that we selfishly wanted to do, right? So people who are in other ways fully functioning, well-rounded human beings, it's actually pretty incredible the things that we can tell ourselves to allow us to continue to live in a way that we want to live, no matter what it does to other people. So there's a lot of things that I think could go into it. I've certainly met people like that. And I honestly think if we're being really honest, there's a lot of people listening, including myself, that maybe if we look back in our life, we think, yeah, I did something fucked up before. And you know what? Maybe deep inside, I did feel kind of bad about it, but not enough to stop me from doing it. Because at the time I had a goal or I had something I wanted to do, or I was selfish, or I didn't want to get in trouble. And I mean, that's the complexity of human nature right there. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that one. Unless you want to share what the actual thing was.
No, I'll wait till we get off the recording for that one. But, no, I'll share it with you. It's really interesting because like I sometimes have a hard time conceptualizing what it's like to be a victim in life. And I mean, this person did this thing, and I think rationalized to themselves that it was okay because, for whatever reason. It's really interesting, man. Like, I can't always see. One of my things that I'm working on is trying to see the world through other people's eyes. So, like, what were they thinking when they did this? And that whatever in their brain said it was okay. How do I start to, I don't know if it's empathy or what the hell it is, but like, I just can't conceptualize what in this person's mind said, hey, I think if I do this, I'm going to feel okay with this, or this is a really good idea right now. It just blows my mind. And again, I'm a student of psychology, very much like yourself, but this is one that just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, one of the like biological kind of anthropological ways that I look at these things is what you just said is self-preservation, right? Like ultimately you know it as well as I do. There are a lot of people in the world. Most people are on a sliding scale in terms of what our ethics are, our morality is, our upbringing, the things that we would do if we were in XYZ kind of situation. And it goes back to this very like instinctive, almost like reptilian part of our brain that is self-preservation. And when you look at it from like the cortisol perspective, we talk about this, how we release cortisol like we're being chased by tigers because that's the way it used to be. That's not the way it is now. So we're doing this like fight or flight kind of life that's really just us sitting at a desk and reacting to emails and shit like that. It's the same with the self-preservation, right? Like it's that kill or be killed, eat or be eaten, but instead we're dealing with social interactions, or we're dealing with relationship stuff, or we're dealing with business stuff. It's not life or death anymore in most cases. It's a little bit more complex and layered and usually social than that. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's a lot less about people there's some sociopaths out there. Most of us are just either insecure or selfish or trying to preserve our own way of life or approach to life and willing to kind of be a fucked up person in the process. I mean, this isn't the most positive way to maybe end off a conversation.
Well, I want to end on something that's a little bit more action oriented for the listeners. So coming back to this subjective and objective thing, because I think we're getting off tangents here. It's not fitness oriented anymore. But so the subjective objective thing, how you can apply this to your life in the most immediate way possible. Objectify your nutrition, right? So for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been subjectively eating. So for 20 years prior to 2016, I was very objective in the way I approached nutrition. It was like I had this particular number of calories a day, and I hit that with every, the percentage of that with every meal, and I made sure everything was very objective. And for the last 4 years, I've been very subjective, which basically means no stress, no plan, no objectives, no outcomes. And I think that's been creating stress for me, right? When you don't have an outcome, you also don't have a definitive result, meaning I don't know that I'm doing well. I don't know that I'm doing poorly. I'm just doing. And I think as a goal-driven species, as an achievement-oriented species, I think the idea of objectifying your nutrition is important. Now, I don't think that means you need to count calories. So one way of objectifying nutrition is go, hey, I need 600 calories a meal at 3 or 4 or 5 meals a day, and that's objective, and I can do that. It can be even more simple than that. It can be, hey, I know that I'm going to objectively eliminate these number of foods, or I'm going to objectively only eat whole foods, or I'm going to objectively have mostly vegetables and meats at my meals. And creating some objective for yourself, obviously the more clear the better, is a really simple jumping off point to start with your nutrition. So if anybody is sitting at home struggling with nutrition, create a daily objective for yourself, or maybe it's a weekly or a monthly objective that says, hey, this month I'm only going to eat meat and vegetables, or this week I'm only going to eat meat and vegetables, or this week I'm going to eat, ketogenic, or this week I'm going to have only foods that are, single ingredient foods. And you have this 1, 2, 3, however many small number of objective outcomes that really allow you to determine if you had success or failure. And if you have success, at the end of the day, you give yourself a check mark. So we win the day. That type of behavior will lead towards success. So this is how we can start to stack our daily wins toward creating our greatest future and our greatest self, and ultimately our mind that serves us and is our supporter and our friend, rather than one that feels like it's an enemy within the gates. Mm-hmm. So everyone listening to this podcast, let us know what your objectives are with your nutrition. So, hey, I want to make sure I hit 3,000 calories a day. Great, do that, but hit it, right? And hey, I want to make sure I only eat meat and vegetables this week. Or maybe I'm just doing carnivore, or maybe I'm doing keto, or whatever it is. And I think that's why people attach to one type of dogma, is it gives them an objective. So it doesn't have to be anything that's dogmatic. Just set some targets for yourself that let you know whether you're succeeded or fallen short. And no matter what happens, once you set a goal, we never fall short, right, guys? You just follow through, objectify it, and I think things will start to become much easier, much more rewarding for you, and hopefully not stressful. And if you've picked something that is stressful for you, then you've chosen the wrong one. It shouldn't be a stress to hit your diet. It should be rewarding.
100% agree. I also would recommend maybe that people add to their objective list of nutrition to eat some organ meats. Just throwing that out there. Eat some organ meat.
I had organ meat for breakfast, Ash. You'd be proud of me.
What did you have?
I have a guy here in Canada that makes me ground meat, like ground grass-fed beef with kidneys and liver and whatever else inside. So I just had probably 10 or 12 ounces of that for breakfast with some of my favorite olive oil. You guys know where that comes from. Fresh Press Olive Oil Company. Don't think they can get it now because I think they're kind of off season, but they'll be starting up again soon. I know TJ has been in Australia actually, so I'm sure the next one coming out is Australia. That'll be soon. But another cool thing that happened when I was in Australia is I got hooked up with some Blue Blocks. Our buddies out in Perth, Andy, sent over some of the amazing sleep goggles. Have you tried those, Ash?
Yeah, they're amazing. They're so cool.
They're so good. It's like wearing a pillow on your eyes. Yeah, it's amazing. So I wore them on the plane. I'm sure that contributed to my amazing ability to sleep. And he sent over a pair of the Smith and the Hudson, which were my two frames of choice. And I really like both of them. And, I'll do a photo shoot for you guys very, very soon because Ashleigh's been requesting some photo shoot.
I want to see if anybody took any pictures of sleeping Ben on the plane with his awesome sleep mask on. So if anybody did that, totally unethical and terrible. But if you did it, post it on social media.
So when we posted the Dave Asprey podcast recently on Instagram, did you see? I think 2 people wrote, "Hey, did you do the butthole tan with Dave?"
Yeah. Inquiring minds want to know, Ben. How'd that go in sunny Bali?
I did butthole tanning by myself in Bali. No, I'm telling you.
I know. I may or may not have asked for visual evidence of that. I haven't gotten any. So we'll just assume you got a normal vitamin D for a normal tanning.
I think it would be a very odd thing to rationalize doing a selfie of me tanning naked in Bali.
That takes a skill that I don't think you have acquired yet. I'll be honest. Right. We'll see.
Yeah, I might need a selfie stick. That would be an interesting pose, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I guess you are kind of flexible. Okay, this is going downhill. We got to get off the call now.
So to summarize what I was just saying
Well, we're
there,
talking about Blue Box. There we go.
shout out to Blue Box. Yeah, shout out to Blue Box for hooking me up with the Smith and the Hudson and the sleep mask, and I love them all. Andy, thank you. And for anyone who is interested in getting hooked up with Blue Box, you can go to blueblocks.com. Ash, what are the details?
It's /muscle intelligence. So Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com /muscle intelligence. And the code is muscle, and they'll give you a discount and you get free shipping on anything you want. So pretty good deal.
Yeah, and legitimately really good stuff, right? Like, I think I've talked about this in the past. I always wear my blue blockers when I'm looking at the computer, and I'll always wear a yellow pair kind of around dusk when the sun starts to come down, especially if I'm out driving. And after dark, I don't suggest wearing your red ones when you're driving, but I think that may be the worst time because you have all these really bright car lights shining right into your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But so I suggest everyone wear the blues the clear ones when they're at the computer, and the yellow ones when you are kind of outside and, getting a little bit too much blue light, or you're inside getting a little too much blue light after the sun has come down.
Yep. That's what I do. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, I haven't seen your picture.
I know. I got to post more selfies. They're very cute. I like the crystal, the blue light ones, like the daytime ones, the best. I've been wearing them a lot and getting really, really good feedback. But the cool thing is that they don't look like, you can get nerdy ones if you want, but they don't look like the typical nerdy light blocking glasses. Like, they're actually very stylish glasses. And then you can kind of pick and choose what works with your face. Like, I've got a couple different ones. I don't remember what the names of the styles that I got, but I'll have to get it and I'll talk about it for next time, because I've got
only look nerdy once you put them on.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
Right.
All right.
Everybody go follow Ashleigh on Instagram so she can flex her back muscles for you and teach you how to eat organ meat, and follow me because I'm cool and I tell you awesome stuff on Instagram. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Don't forget to leave us a message on how you're objectifying your nutrition. I would love to hear your ideas. If you have any feedback on it, I'd be very curious as well, because like I said, this is just an awareness that came to me last night in my meditation, and there's something that you guys think is useful or that maybe is a blind spot for me. I'd love to hear you reach out. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, because your reviews and subscriptions is what drives the podcast, guys. Thank you so much, Ash. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pekulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.